Leaving a Legacy is brought to you by hipstersofthecoast.com and can be found on the Top Deck app every Friday. You can support the show directly at patreon.com/leavingalegacy.
Magic is power.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leaving a Legacy. My name is Patrick. I'm your Legacy newbie. With me this week, as always, Mr. Jerry Me. What's up, Jerry?
Not much, Pat. Not much. How you doing?
I am doing awesome, man. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Excellent. You're packed full of energy. You got looks like you're wearing your workout outfit.
No, I just spent the day at the beach, so I'm a little burnt. You can't really see it in the video, but I'm a little burned. So I'm just taking some of the pressure off the shoulders to alleviate
by wearing as few clothing as possible.
Exactly. So
Pat was actually late to recording because he was recording his OnlyFans before this. So that's why. Luckily, Leaving a Legacy is a audio podcast, not a video podcast.
I mean, yeah, you gotta make the money somehow, Jerry. You know, gotta pay those bills.
Gotta make ends meet. I respect it. I respect the hustle. I respect it.
So how you been, man? What have you been up to?
Oh, pretty good. I've been playing a lot of Magic Online. I tried getting to F&M on Friday, but the schedule just didn't work out. But I have been playing a lot of paper Magic over webcam still. It seems like that's still going strong. You know, even with stores opening up, I think people just realized, oh, I can play with my friends who maybe moved across the country, or just my buddy Dan who, you know, had a baby, and it's a lot harder.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a lot harder for him to get out. So we're like, oh, we'll just jam some, you know, Magic on, or, you know, paper Magic Online games.
Yeah.
So still playing Magic Online, just to kind of try out a bunch of decks with the the rental service I use, which is great. But then just, you know, staying in touch with people through the webcam. And then I am going to go to actual paper F&M at Gaming Etc. this Friday as well.
Oh, sick. Well, I am definitely going to Wednesday Night Legacy at ELD this week. Maybe I'll try to shoot up to Etsy on Friday too.
Oh, two Legacy tournaments in one week, Pat. You're gonna double your turn.
I got a lot of catching up to do. So it's funny. I actually started playing again this week. I busted out Liam's old Goblins deck, and I was playing against Blue Red Delver. We are just refreshing his memory on how to play Magic. And I realized when I opened my hand, I still had Dreadhorde Arcanists in there. So I was like, oh, buddy, I just want to let you know this card's illegal. He's like, it's illegal and you're still playing with it? I'm like, it hasn't been illegal that long. But yeah, so
scumbag Pat.
Yeah, he's
cheating the 7-year-old.
Hey, all I can say is I could have put probes in there. He would have never known. So, I could have been playing Deathrite Shaman. He would never know.
Pro plus Dreadhorde, Blue Red Delver, like that's disgusting.
But yeah, so I'm pretty stoked. I'm gonna update the list. Actually, I'm looking for like a good paper list because the Magic Online list I find a little different. So I'm gonna look for like a stock 60, and then I'll kind of just figure out my sideboard from there. But I'm pretty stoked to get it all sleeved up, man, and get out there Wednesday and play. So I'm amped.
Well, speaking of paper tournaments coming back, we put out the call on the last week's episode for people to post up their local game stores that were rolling out the paper Legacy again. And people delivered. So I just want to give these stores a quick shout out. UCN Gaming in Plainfield, Indiana. They are starting back up monthly Legacy. Looks like on the 22nd of every month or whatever falls on a Sunday. But their next one is August 22nd at 1 p.m. in Sunday in Plainfield, Indiana, UCN Gaming. Then we got Owl Central Games out in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. They're doing a 1K on August 15th. So that's awesome.
Nice.
And then also great stories in Uxbridge. I believe it's Uxbridge, Mass. They didn't actually put the state. Yeah, Uxbridge, Mass. They are also doing F&M Legacy. So shout out to those stores for bringing it back. Also, of course, some of our favorite stores. We got Gaming Etc. running F&M Legacy and ELD Games.
Time Vault Games. ELD
Time Vault Games. ELD's Time Vault Games.
Yeah, in Bellingham. Yep.
In Bellingham, Mass.
Yeah, they just did their trios last weekend, and apparently it was it was excellent. People were super stoked about it. It was very positive experience for everyone. So I'm really happy to see that. Eric always runs great events there. I think really New England sets the gold standards for legacy events, personally.
Making it a competition.
No, not a competition. I'm just saying. I think I'm just saying I'm hyping up our TOs up here. I think they do a really good job.
They do a great job. And if people posted other stores that I missed, I do apologize. I try to get them all, but if your local game store is bringing back Legacy, definitely
send them in. We want to know about them.
Yeah,
we want to know about them.
Post it on the Facebook site. If I missed it, please send me a DM, and we'll be sure to shout them out next week.
Yes.
But yeah, spread the word, guys. Let's get back out there and start playing now that it's safe to do so again with vaccines and whatnot. So
absolutely,
let us know of where the paper magic is.
Can't wait.
Hell yeah.
In the words of Bart Scott, can't wait.
I'm going to guess that's a Sportswell reference.
Yeah, it was, that reference is literally only for Ian McCune. That's it.
That's the only person
he'll appreciate.
Good.
I send that gift to him all the time. Yeah.
We're that far jumping the shark that we're putting inside jokes for individual listeners.
Listener who I can almost guarantee he does not listen to this podcast, but that's for Ian. That's for Ian, buddy.
I mean, there's there's 4 people who listen at this point.
Yeah. We have one on here, I think. So maybe we'll see.
We'll see. Speaking of, we do have an awesome guest returning to the cast this week. Amazing legacy content creator and producer, as well as a level 2 judge, Mr. Brian Koval. Welcome back. How you doing?
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Thanks for coming. Always glad to have you on the cast. We wanted to have you come on because, as always, you're pumping out the legacy content, which is always great. But also I wanted to have you on specifically as a judge because you just did a presentation about, judging in legacy that I thought was pretty cool. So just kind of wanted to talk to you about that a little bit.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I was invited by another Pittsburgh local level 3 judge, Eliana Rabinowitz, who was putting together a Welcome Back Magic the Gathering judge conference because everyone's a little rusty. No one's judged an event in a year and a half.
Right.
Magic Online doesn't have those. And
to be fair, Eternal Weekend, which is going to be held on Magic Online, is going to have judges.
That's
really? Wait, what?
Which I feel is kind of like lifeguards at the Olympic swimming events. It's just, but you gotta have them.
Yeah, well, it turns out last year we needed a judge in the finals of Eternal Weekend as well. When a player got disqualified, the winner got disqualified. Everyone got bumped up at the end.
Wait, how do you get disqualified from an online event?
You DM your winning an opponent and say, you can't make top 8. I can. Would you like half the money? And it turns out your opponent is streaming the event. So it's all on video. And it was noticed later that day. And I actually got 3rd in that tournament, losing to David Lance in top 4. And David Lance lost to the person who did the bribing. And then we got an email a day and a half later that's like, hey, David, you win. Brian, you're in 2nd. So
right. I actually remember that. I remember that. We talked about that in the podcast. I mean, obviously it was a year and a half ago, but
long ago.
Yeah. Wow.
That's crazy. So
awkward stuff.
Turns out sometimes even Michael Phelps gets Charlie horse, and that Olympic lifeguard has a job to do. So
it's true.
That's awesome. Not awesome that the person got disqualified.
Yeah, that's a weird.
It's awesome that judges are a key part of our community, and it's great to have one on to kind of talk about it from the judge perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So I released a video of that conference. Eliana asked me to do the legacy section. There was a format expert for each thing. They wanted an update, what's going on in these formats, what might judges need to know when they weighed in. And the standard judge got to talk about the companion rule is a little different than printed and some sort of normal stuff. I got to talk about the all of legacy, which is just when she asked me to do this, I was like, yeah, sure, I could talk about legacy. That's no problem. But I didn't account for the fact that I would need to present about legacy and it would be on Zoom. I would need to make a PowerPoint and like semi-scripted, and I wanted to produce a product that somebody could just click through later and read the slides if they didn't want to hear my voice or whatever. So I ended up putting like 20 hours into this project, and then another 2 or 3 hours into editing it after I recorded it live to make the thing that I released on YouTube cleaner than the stop and go of conference presentation. So this turned out to be a huge project, and I'm pretty proud of it.
Awesome. Yeah. It was linked in the Facebook group when you came out with it, but we'll relink it again with this episode. But for our listeners who haven't had a chance to watch it yet, can you give us kind of the 50,000 foot view? What were some kind of the interesting points you brought up?
I kicked it off with just some practical considerations. This is on the Bosch and Roll YouTube channel, by the way. I haven't even said that yet.
Oh,
Bosch and Roll, BOSH, letter N, ROLL, Bosch and Roll. So check it out. So I started out with just some practical considerations of number one, decks cost $5,000 to $20,000, which is not true in standard, where decks are like $100 to $300 a lot of the time. And cards are always valuable, but there's a difference between like a car and a couple trips to Chipotle. So just like you gotta
like 3 trips of Chipotle, depending on who you are.
Yeah, right. Chasing that Chipotle sponsorship. But yeah, so I talked about just the price of cards up front. And then the next thing I talked about was safety and security as a result of that. Deck checks are something that judges do. They show up to your table, they take your deck, make sure it matches your list, then they bring it back, and they say you're good, or they give you a game loss for having the wrong cards in your deck.
I do actually have something to say about that, because I have a personal experience with that.
Oh, I can't wait.
I was it was either a GP or an SCG or something like that, and I shuffle up my deck, present my deck, and all of a sudden I get a tap on my shoulder. And I look over and I just like see some person. I literally just like quickly look over my shoulder, and then they go, it's like, hey, you guys are getting a deck check. And I'm like, all right, this happened a million times before, whatever. And I, put my deck in my deck box, hand it over my shoulder. The person takes the other deck and walks away. And then like 2 minutes later, I was just thinking there, I'm like, huh. And I'd look at my opponent like, did you like get a good look at the guy that we just gave our decks to? He goes, no, why? He goes, I didn't either. In fact, I don't even know if he was a judge. And both me and my opponent just stand up and run over to the judge table. And of course it was a judge, and it was legit. But like the thought just crossed my mind. Is like, I just handed over 10 grand to someone and I didn't even look at their face.
Yeah. I tell that story in the video too, real quick, when I'm talking about this. A judge, like probably 8-10 years ago, somebody walked up at a Star City tournament and they were just like, I want to be a judge. What do I do? And that's a thing. Like they just take walk-ups and they train them up a little bit, test them at the end of the day. And that's a perfectly normal thing. But it was a Legacy Open. And this person, who is a friend of mine, I've known him a decade. He's a wonderful level 2 judge now. But at the time, he was wearing like a baggy, like Slipknot shirt and those pants you get at Hot Topic with all the chains and like stuff hanging off of them.
Okay, so he sounds awesome.
Yeah, stand up role model. And
yes, that's my kind of outfit. I like it.
Yeah. Like I said, person I've known for years. I knew him before this. Like I might have even told him, like, yeah, go ahead, walk up. You could be a judge. Like it might have been me, but like, yeah. And he was dressed like that, and they were just like, okay, new judge candidate, let's throw him on deck checks. And he was walking around like that. They didn't have a uniform for him. Like he just was just approaching Legacy players and was like, "Can I have your decks?" Like, dressed like that,
and slips him in the many zippered pockets of his pants.
Exactly, and just across the board. I watched it happen 3 or 4 times during the day. I just happened to be in eye shot of it, and the players were just like, "Yeah, okay, here you go."
It's kind of wild. It's
I really don't like. Can we not release this episode? We might have just like given the plans to some of you.
I will say that if you're ever pulled over by a car that's not marked by like an undercover cop, you are 100% legally like in the right to call for a marked cruiser to come. So I'm just saying, like, if there's a judge who comes up to a person who comes up to you and they're not in judge regalia, you don't know who they are. I would assume it would be okay. Not a huge deal if you're like, oh, can I just like have like a judge with a judge shirt on just come up and like take my $10,000 Legacy deck. I imagine that would be okay, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an extra fold to that now, because the judge program was canceled like right before COVID shut down, and it was replaced by something called Judge Academy, which is a third-party thing, not actually run by Wizards of the Coast. They're contracted to run the judging operation now, and there's no Judge Academy uniform. Like judge uniforms provided by Wizards of the Coast are gone. There's not going to be more. Judge Academy sells polo shirts that say like Judge Academy on them. You can still wear your old uniform if you own one, but the rules about what a judge has to be wearing, even at a premier level event, are just, it's basically like whatever.
Interesting.
Go nuts, fam.
So if I wanted to show up in like a black and white striped shirt, like an umpire from a baseball game or like from a football game, like that'd be okay.
See, that's what Pat's mind goes to. I want to get one of those giant inflatable T-Rex costumes, and I would judge in one of those.
We can do both. Just slap the ref shirt over the T-Rex. No one will question you.
That would actually pretty great.
It's Tyrannosaurus Ref. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Judge. I'd like to see you bend down with the inflated T-Rex mouth and try to pick up the decks.
Yeah,
just the claws. You're like,
just knock out the person sitting two seats down.
Yeah, like the TO is going to have rules about it. The TO might even have their own thing depending on how organized they are. Like Star City Games is going to have a Star City uniform, but at FNM there's no real rule anymore. Like every random store is not going to have a judge who owns a uniform. So, and those stores probably aren't running deck checks for FNM either. But like there could be a gray space in between Premier Event with their stuff together and FNM where the actual judge might not have a uniform on.
Yeah, for sure.
So watch out for that.
So that's just something to keep an eye on. I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue, but yeah, don't just hand your decks out willy nilly to people at events, guys. I'm just going to say that we are all a trusting community, but with the prices these days, you know, better safe than sorry.
Yeah, I hope nobody thinks less of me, but it's my day job to think about safety and security. Like that's my real life. And I constantly, like in the back of my brain, every time I'm at a Grand Prix, like there's a tickle that's like, I have a closet full of judge uniforms at home. Like I can mop up.
All right.
And it's more of like a security consultant thing. Like, can I have your decks? Yes. Thank you. Come back 30 seconds later. Guess what? I'm not a judge. Pay attention.
Right.
Like I'm not going to do it, but like
that would actually,
it's in my head.
That would be a great like video when events come up, like do kind of like a 60-minute style. What would you do? You know, undercover. It's like, hey, you just handed your $60,000 deck to a total stranger and they're just going to walk out of here.
Please have a seat.
Yeah.
We need to talk to you about just giving your deck out to anybody.
Why are the police here?
Yeah, I mentioned that security awareness in the video, and I mentioned to the judges that the players might want to keep an eye on you while you're checking the deck, because normally they just flight away behind some curtain.
Right.
And you don't know where they are. But like having the deck check station set up where they could sit like 3 tables away and just see you, or even some players are going to sit right there with you. Like I was at Eternal Weekend Paris at the end of 2019, and Joe Brennan was there, vintage champ Joe Brennan. His cards are alpha. His cards are foil. Like everything is the max that it can be. And he got deck checked and he was just like, I'm coming with you.
Yeah.
Nobody's walking anywhere out of my reach with these cards, period. Right. And I think that is a reasonable request.
And I would also say it's great when judges offer that up, because I've been deck checked 100 times over the years, and only once did a judge actually say to me, it's like, you guys can stay here, you can come with me, whatever you want. And I was like, oh yeah, I will come with you. And I just walked over and, you know, watched them do the deck check. Like, oh, that's interesting. I've never actually seen a deck check happen before. That's interesting how they do it. And then they handed it back to me and said, you know, you're good to go.
Yeah. That's really good customer service that I've never actually seen or heard of in my 12 years as a judge. And it's really great. And it's the opposite of how a lot of judges end up in their own heads in just sort of like the business as usual. And this is something I tell judges all the time, especially now that I play way more than I judge, is that they got to remember the player perspective, and they're there to run a tournament for players, because judges, especially like deep, like Kool-Aid has such a negative connotation, but the judges who are just sipping on the judge Kool-Aid and they're just deep in that circle, they're only thinking about tournament operations. They're only thinking about turning around that deck check as quick as possible. Like, I got to get it back in 7 minutes. So with the 3-minute extension, it's a 10-minute. Like, they try to, there's like limits and targets and things like that that they try to hit. And they're thinking about that. They're not thinking about your safety necessarily, the safety of your cards or your personal comfort walking your cards away. And you see this sometimes with rulings too, where a judge will just do something that is innocuous to a judge, but crushing to a player, where if the deck check came back with a problem and like a sideboard card was wrong, and it's like, yeah, I knew you meant red elemental blast, not blue elemental blast. Your deck doesn't even have blue in it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, whoa. You just said this at the table in front of my opponent.
Right.
Like, that's obviously just like mind melting to a constructed tournament player, but the judge is just like, oh, this is so silly. Yeah. So like things like that do happen. And my advice to judges is remember the player experience and what you're actually there to serve and facilitate.
Yep. Yeah, good points. So speaking with that, also probably another big difference between legacy and standard is player experience. You know, I would feel at standard events, the judges probably know more about Magic than close to, 95% of the players in that tournament. In a legacy tournament, though, I don't think that is anywhere close to it. In fact, you probably have a lot of circumstances where many, if not most of the players might have been playing legacy for longer than the judge was judging. Does that come up at all?
Yeah. So there's this weird tier list that just sort of, or hierarchy, I guess, that sort of emerges where at like limited F&M, like when the judge is like, has everyone drafted before? And 6 hands go up that say no. Like that's one thing.
Yep.
You know, like you pass to the left, then to the right, then back to the left, everyone. Like that's one level of judging. And then there's like F&M standard. Those people might have drafted enough times that now they have a deck and they know very little more than they did when they started drafting. Then there's like the tournament grinders, like the Star City players, the PTQ players who will play whatever format it is, whatever the big tournament is that week, they're playing. Like they play standard through legacy. They don't care. It's all Magic to them. And they're going to know everything everywhere. Modern tends to be the sweet spot of players who really know what they're doing. And then legacy, you get people who've been playing for a long time and frequently not in the most constructive way. So you get the legacy players who have like maybe not come out to a tournament in 10 years. Maybe they play one tournament a year and they're like, what do you mean I missed my trigger? You're a damn cheater. And it's like, those are the rules. You got to get with it. And like you get sort of that with some of the legacy community. And I mentioned in my presentation to the judges, be ready to explain rules more than once, explain them in different ways, be ready to mitigate some friction. Like the trigger policy, it's been what it is for years. Like if you don't acknowledge your trigger, it's gone. You get wrecked. Sorry, play your cards right. Like that's just how the game works now. And you still see somebody at every big enough legacy event, someone is mad about it. They're probably at the bottom table at 03. People who are actually playing at a competitive level know what's really going on. They're all over it, but that is something you run into. So it's a mix.
Yeah. Well, so there definitely are players who have just been playing forever and they're not up to date with the most recent rules. But kind of what I was referring to more is like, I remember the big one was I abrupt decay, your rest in peace. Which one goes to the graveyard and which one gets exiled? And it's happened 100 times. I'm sure other people have other examples too. But, someone calls for a judge. They come over and go, ask this question. And then 3 other people at the table respond with the answer before the judge can even open their mouth. And then the judge just rolls their eyes and goes, yes, here's how it goes. Even though 3 other people at the table said it, it's still my job to go over it. So I can imagine that can get annoying from the judge perspective when players who are not judges jump in with, rules explanations.
Yeah. So there's a couple layers to that. One, just as a player, don't do that. Like at F&M, it's fine. Like if the only like quote unquote judge is the store employee who's in the middle buying a collection or whatever, and you can answer the question, just okay, hand wave. At a Star City or above at a Grand Prix, you should not be answering rules questions for anyone. That should be the sole job of the judge, because the way judges are trained to answer questions make sure that it doesn't end up being coachy. Like, how does this rule work versus how do I make this play in a way that benefits me? Like, as a judge, like I've approached the table and I'm like, hey, what's up? Like, judge call. And they're like, they just show me 2 cards and they're like, how do I make this work? I'm like, that's not a question I can answer.
That's a coaching tip. I had a similar one where it was, someone like Force of Willed their spell, and then they cast Misdirection, and they're like, their question is like, how does Misdirection work? But the way they ask it is in such a way that it turns into a coaching. And then you have someone who's not a judge just pip up and go, it's like, oh, you can do it. You just redirect the Force of Will back to the Misdirection itself to counter it. Mm-hmm. That's not giving a rules clarification anymore. That is strictly giving advice. You just assisted that player in their competitive game.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that judges get trained on early on. And I imagine lawyers go through similar, not really like hazing rituals, but like like tests of like, hey, do you know what time it is? And the answer to that question is not look at your watch and tell them what time it is. The answer is I could, or yes, I do. Like your answer, like what time is it versus do you know what time it is? Mm-hmm. Those are different questions. And judges have to think like that. Like, hey, judge, can I Pithing Needle Swamp? You sure can. Mm-hmm. Is the answer. It's not going to do what you want it to do, but you can't say that. Like, judge, can I misdirect Force of Will to itself? No, you cannot. That's the answer. If they ask a better question, like, hey, judge, I have heard that misdirection can move Force of Will to like counter itself or counter the misdirection or something, like, depending on how much information they give you, you can answer that question. You can also neutrally prompt them. I can't answer that the way you asked it. Can you ask a better question? And you can get to a question that you can answer, but just a random person being like, oh no, the misdirection moves to itself, not to the Force. That's how that works. Like that's a problem at competitive rules enforcement level.
Yeah. Right. Answer the question they ask, not the question you want to answer.
Exactly. Yep.
Same thing also with, describing cards and describing art and stuff. So you can't say, hey, judge, what card stops my opponent's planeswalkers from working? But you can say, hey, judge, what was that card? I think it was printed in Kamigawa. It's like a metal rod or something. And when it comes into play, you name a card and it prevents that card from activating. What's that card? And the judge can tell you that, that's Pithing Needle that you're thinking of.
Yeah, you can uniquely identify cards, and that's good enough for a judge to give you the oracle text. A judge can always give you the oracle text. If you're like, hey, judge, can you give me the oracle text of Chains of Mephistopheles? They can always provide that for you. If you can also be like, hey, judge, that card from Legends, it's 1 in a black, has like a crazy dog face on it. It messes with like how people draw cards. I would pull up Chains of Mephistopheles for that player. That's good enough. If they can do that, it's cool. And like Cabal Therapy, that 2-drop enchantment you played last game that messed up how I draw cards, that works too. Like that's good enough.
So speaking of that, Brian, I do actually have one example from my Magic history of a judge coaching or helping me through a tournament. You ready for this? It involves Chains of Mephistopheles.
Oh, geez.
I was at a tournament. I think I was playing Aggro Loam or something like that. And in my Aggro Loam list, I run 2 Chains of Mephistopheles. So came up pretty frequently. After the 3rd judge call in a row over 3 consecutive rounds of, hey, judge, what does this card do? The judge just printed out the Chains of Mephistopheles flowchart that's floating around on the internet. He printed it out and he gave it to me and he said, I want you to keep this with you for your future rounds.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I did a similar thing, not quite the flowchart level, but at GP Columbus, the one that Bryant top aided and Caleb Durward top aided with Vengevine. This was like 100 years ago. That GP, I had an Abyss in my deck, and it was Italian, and this was before Legacy was really big. And I just went up to the head judge at the beginning of the GP and I was like, can you just print out Oracle and initial that I can show it to my opponents? Because this was when it was draconian. Like if you look at any piece of paper during the point where you're sat down for a match, it's a match loss. You're done.
Yeah.
And like, I just got the blanket approval. Like she printed it out. She signed her name and was like, yes, you can show this piece of paper only to your opponents during the tournament.
Oh my God. That reminded me of a tournament I went to with Dan where he was playing Nether Void, similar situation. And he cast Nether Void and his opponent picks it up and it's in Italian, of course. And he goes, wait, what's this? And Dan goes, it's an enchantment that says every spell cast gets countered unless you pay 3. And he just goes, what? he just goes, judge, just completely flabbergasted. And then he like looks down the table at his friend. He's like, Mark, have you heard about this card that mana leaks every spell played? And his friend goes, oh yeah, Nether Void. Yeah, great card.
Yep. Yeah, the cards are crazy. And like you said, players do tend to know what they are. Mm-hmm. I've had conversations with some of the like serious old heads, like the Joe Brennan, Roland Chang, Rich Shea, and they're just like firing off cards that I barely remember exist and just describing the full Oracle text of them. It's just like some obscure uncommon from Arabian Nights. Like, okay, you guys are in the weeds and that's cool. Yeah, I would call a judge for this one.
People are insane. My friend Warren, who is also a vintage old guard, you can describe a card to him, and not only will he tell you the name of the card or the Oracle text, he will tell you the artist.
Wow,
like
that's impressive.
That's how deep into the cards that he gets.
We were playing a road trip game back when road trips were a thing, and the game was, can you describe the art of this card from its name, and can you name the card from its art? So we went both ways, and it turns out I can name basically any card from its art, but if you ask me to describe the art, it's a mess because I don't like study the art, even though your 2 art review episodes were some of my favorite Magic content ever made.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like I did love listening to that, but I don't like look at the art and really soak it in. I just get a general like peripheral feel for what's going on. It took me probably 8 years after Tarmogoyf was printed to realize that it's like he's holding a tiny little man up and like opening his mouth to swallow it. Like, oh yeah, I thought he was just like scratching at the camera. Like, I don't know.
Also, that art's weird because like depending on the perspective you look, it kind of looks like its elbow is its mouth.
Yes,
and then it's like its mouth is in a totally different place from where you expect it to be.
That's awesome.
Yep, no idea. There's a card from Time Spiral, same era, called, I think it's called like Veiling Oddity. It has suspend, and when it comes off suspend, some number of creatures become unblockable. And I spent that entire draft format, and I drafted a lot over those 3 sets, thinking it was like a hooded figure was the art. But then I actually looked closely at it, and it's like 2 like gooey orbs creating sort of like a semicircle ovular shape that sort of just looks like a hood if you're not really looking at the art. And that's not at all what's happening in the art. And that's the story for basically every Magic card for me.
Awesome. That's cool. So, other things for, judge tips, things aren't always what they appear.
Yep. Reading the Oracle text, that's the big one. Cards don't do what they say they do. And it doesn't have to be an old card even. Like the rules have changed fundamentally multiple times, like 6th edition rules update, then mana burn leaving, then damage leaving the stack. And just Magic has fundamentally changed a number of times. The comprehensive rules have updated a number of times. Creature types are constantly changing. Like every time a new set comes out, it's like, oh, dog is a supported creature type now. Let's go errata all the hounds in Magic's history. And a big one that I pointed out in the video was Phyrexian is now a creature type as of Kaldheim. Vorinclex is a printed Phyrexian, and then in Modern Horizons 2, germ tokens were updated to be Phyrexian germ tokens, and every single printed creature with infect is a Phyrexian. Right. So it's a bad time to be a infect deck against Plague Engineer.
I was going to say, hey, Plague Engineer, how you doing today?
Yeah, you don't have to pick human or elf or rogue or blink moth or like you just say Phyrexian and they're all done.
Ooh. But does Ink Moth, when it changes, does that also become a Phyrexian then?
Yep, it is a Phyrexian Blink Moth.
Wow. Yep. I did that one I didn't know about. That's interesting.
Yep,
wow.
They didn't miss anything. Plague Engineer is getting it.
Yikes.
Yikes, indeed. Any other kind of highlights from the judge talk that you want to talk about, or maybe just judging in general for Legacy?
The last thing for the players and for the judges, like I told it to the judges that they should include this in their opening announcements. For the players, hook your backpack around your foot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't set it down next to you. Don't set it down between your legs. Don't set it down behind you. Hook it on around your foot. Like, it's not going anywhere, or you're going with it. You should have like some physical point of contact that doesn't require your full attention to manage your belongings at all times.
I have seen people bring like a steel cable with their backpack,
really,
and just like steel cable their backpack to their chair.
Wow.
Because like I've seen it countless times where one of the most common ways that Legacy decks are stolen is at these big events, and not just Legacy, just decks in general.
Yeah.
And this was actually a thing happening on the start. I don't want to say that circuit actually just because it's not their fault. It just they were a target because there were lots of Magic players there. But there was like a gang of 3 or 4 people that would just like target people. One person would distract them. The other person would like use their foot to nudge the backpack out from under their seat. And then the third person would just walk by, scoop up the backpack and keep walking. And, you know, they stole dozens, if not hundreds of backpacks from Magic events this way before they were caught. And it was a big deal when they got caught.
They were tackled by Judge Adam Shaw.
I know. It's one of my favorite Adam Shaw stories.
Physically brought them to the ground. James Elliott, retired judge, was yelling, "Judge, judge, judge," and pointing at the guys as they ran for the door. And Adam Shaw took them to the ground. And when the police were called, they did some investigation and found their hotel room just had dozens of backpacks in it. They traced it back, and
they had most likely been doing this at multiple events. Like they were a set up organization.
Wow.
Yeah, this was a long time ago, and I hope people have learned from it. But it might have been so long ago now that story is not in the brains of new players or people who are new to Legacy.
Yep.
And just in general, like security, not just in Magic events, but in your life. Like when people are like, I don't need to lock my car, I'll be right back. It's like, that's an opportunity for someone to steal from you.
Yeah.
Like, what's it take to press the lock button? Nothing. Like, just do it. Or like, I don't lock my house when I go to bed. It's like, that's just stupid. Like, it's cool that you're comfortable in your neighborhood. I'm jealous of that life. And like, you don't need to just live your life like looking for the nearest exit just in case there's a mass shooting or something, though in America, who knows? But there are basic steps you can take to reduce risk, and most crime is of opportunity. Like they see that backpack and they nab it. Most people are not like going to follow you down a dark alley and jump you for it. That's a high level thing, but a backpack on the ground, the person didn't even have to plan to steal from you that day. They're just like, oh, well, if I can just scoop up 5 Gs real quick, I'm gonna.
Yep. I remember my dad told me this where, you know, he like locked up a toolbox or something with, you know, just like a little like bicycle lock, but it's like, this thing was like a $1 lock that you could just like rip off with your hand. And I'm just like, Dad, why are you even bothering? He goes, and he just said to keep the honest people honest.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just,
exactly.
You know, remove that temptation, and you know you will see a lot fewer incidents.
There will be nothing more heartbreaking than like I actually was thinking about this the other day. Like if my Legacy deck got stolen, I might not ever play Legacy again. Like it'd be that difficult to get back into the deck. You know what I mean? So keep track of your stuff, man. Don't take precautions.
Yeah, I'm pretty realistic about stuff. Like I don't mind like staring into the abyss and like making a worst case scenario plan, but if I think about like my Magic collection being harmed in any way or stolen or like a house fire, like it makes me physically ill and I don't want to think about it. Like I have it insured through my homeowner's insurance. If people have pursued that, or if you haven't, you probably should. My company, they just put like a rider on my homeowner's insurance and I pay extra and it covers my collectibles. So we do like an annual appraisal through the local game store. They sign off that like, this is what this is worth. I send them a spreadsheet of what I own, and I just, if anything happens to those cards anywhere, I'm covered. Like if they get stolen at an event, or if my house burns down at home, like it's good. So please do that if you want legacy cards.
Yep.
So you don't have to tell people how much it is or anything like that, but would you say, like, was it more than you expected, less than you expected?
I think it was less.
Less than you expected it?
Yeah. It was perfectly reasonable to do.
Yeah, because I know other people have thought about getting the legacy collection insured, but then they're like, well, nothing's really, it's the same argument you have against every form of insurance. It's like, well, nothing's happened yet, so why do I need insurance? Mm-hmm. It's like, you don't get insurance for the past, you get insurance for the future.
Right.
Yep, exactly. Worth doing.
Yep. Awesome. Before we wrap up tonight, I also just wanted to touch on, I've been playing the heck out of 8 Walla on Magic Online.
The Walla meta.
The Walla meta.
You called it out, the Walla meta.
And I know you came out with a video on it a week or two ago. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that sweet deck. Could you kind of let our listeners know what the deck does? And it is tricky. Like you pointed out in your video, it is easy to play that deck wrong and not even realize you're playing it wrong.
Yeah, Blazing Root Walla is added to Basking Root Walla. So now there's 8 free creatures. If you discard them, they just come into play. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a perfectly reasonable starting hand, like a mull of 5 that just has like Lion's Eye Diamond, Root Walla, Angie's Ravager, Vengevine. You just discard your hand, float red with the diamond, cast the Ravager, cast the Root Walla, and triggers. Let's go. Yep. It's party time. And like that's what that deck does. That's actually only 4 cards. I gave them an extra card on that mull to 5. Like this deck explodes. And if you're not paying attention, or if you don't know, if you're not familiar with what they do, you might think it's an aggro deck. You might think it's a Hogak deck, but it's closer to a Dredge deck. Like as far as play pattern goes, like when you play against Dredge as a fair blue deck, it's your job to force a will literally anything that hits the stack. It's like Careful Study, nope. Lion's Eye Diamond, out. Like whatever that first thing that hits the stack is, you got to hit it because you're not going to get another window.
Yep.
And that's how you have to play against this 8 Walla deck too. It's pretty terrifying.
Yeah. For sure. It is great. I love Burning Inquiry or Burning Inquisition? I forget what it is, but it's
Inquiry.
Yeah, Burning Inquiry. It's like 1 red, draw 3, discard 3 at random.
Both players do it.
Yeah, both players did it. I've just gotten some nutty draws off of that, where it's like discard 3 Root Wallas, and like, oh, this is great. In response to the Root Walla triggers on the stack, sack my LED, put Vengevines into my graveyard, cast the Root Wallas, Vengevines come back, and it's just like, oh, I just got 12 power on turn 1.
Wow, what's that like? Because when I cast Burning Inquiry, I discard 2 Hollow Ones and a Lion's Eye Diamond, and my hand is Vengevine to 2 Root Wallas at the end.
I will say, like, Hollow One is heartbreaking in that deck, because there are a lot of situations like that where you're like, I just need to discard a Root Walla or a Vengevine, and I win the game. And then you discard Hollow One. You're like, no, you're supposed to be in my hand.
That's the one spell in the deck that you aren't comfortable just yeeting into the graveyard, and it goes there every time.
Yeah, I feel in the future we might get a better Hollow One that fits the shell a bit better, and this deck just gets even more nutty, because it is like the one thing we're like, all right, it's worth playing, but this is where the engine blows up in our face sometimes.
I like the tension of Hollow One. I like that there is some tension, at least, that it's not just like Burning Inquiry isn't just Ancestral Recall / Hymn to Turok.
Right.
Like I like that they got to give up something, but that deck is really explosive, really powerful, and just the anemic beats. Even if you have like Rest in Peace or Tormod's Crypt, whatever, the Surgical for the Vengevine, just putting 2 or 3 Root Wallas into play on turn 1 gets over the finish line a lot of the time.
I've also noticed, especially Blazing Root Walla, those things are delvers. Against a lot of decks, they're just delvers, because you end up having all this extra mana when you don't have your explosive hands. Like, you're not really doing anything. So you just sink all your mana into pumping your Root Wallas, and now your 3/1/1s just turned into 3 3/3s, and you're swinging for 9 damage.
Yeah, I had this awesome game on video the other day. I say awesome with extreme prejudice. And I was on the play with a standstill deck, and I was like, Lango, opponent plays the Underworld Cookbook. And I was like, okay, I'm going to jam the Standstill. And so I had like Standstill, land number 3, Shark Typhoon in my hand. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to jam this Standstill. If they have no Rootwalla, I win. If they have Blazing Rootwalla, I can trade off my Shark for it next turn. If they have Basking Rootwalla, I lose. They had Basking Rootwalla. Just discarded to make a food in response to my Standstill, jumps into play at instant speed, and I just died in 3-point chunks, had to break my own Standstill a few turns later. Bad times.
Bad times. It does warm my heart that Basking Rootwalla is actually seeing a fair bit of play. It's not just a flash in the pan. It is a very cool deck to see in the meta.
Yeah, if you're old, and I imagine a lot of our listeners are because it's a legacy podcast, like if you were there when Basking Rootwalla was previewed, like that Torment preview season, and then the Madness standard and block formats, like there's a lot of nostalgia attached to that card that just wasn't good for a long time. And I'm glad it's back. Vintage has found ways to abuse it even before the Blazing Rootwalla, like the Turbo, Bizarre Baghdad, Hollow One, Vengevine decks, Basking Rootwalla. That deck, the Vintage deck even plays Memnite. Like they're just really trying to throw Vengevines at you. And the Legacy needed Blazing Rootwalla's help to get there, and I'm glad it did.
Yeah, I feel Madness is actually one of my favorite mechanics. Like it feels like such a well-designed mechanic that is fun and interesting, and it feels very dangerous. Like I could definitely see them messing up a Madness card and, you know, making it on par with like a Tendrils of Agony, where it's like, oh, you just broke this mechanic in half. But R&D has been pretty good so far, where they haven't really done that. All the Madness cards have been good and interesting, but none of them have been like format warping.
Yeah, the Resleevables podcast, Cedric Phillips and Patrick Sullivan, they go set by set through Magic and just do a nostalgia throwback. How does the set look in the modern eye? Patrick Sullivan is a game designer so he looks at it through a game designer's eye, knowing what we know in 2021. It's my favorite podcast. No offense to myself or you guys, but that's phenomenal
that sounds
content.
Awesome. I need to check that out.
That does sound pretty cool.
And the most recent episode was Torment, and Patrick actually hates Madness. He thinks it's too prescriptive. Like basically, he likes when you can take your cards out of the draft format or out of the standard format and like go put them in a deck for the next 10 years. And like, that's a value the card can have. And Madness is just extremely prescriptive of there's one thing you do with this. Like you don't look at Basking Rootwalla and you're like, oh, maybe my opponent will cast Mind Rot. Like, no, you put it in a deck with Faithless Looting, and like, there's only one thing you can really do with a Madness card. But in the same conversation, Cedric was like, you're crazy. I don't care. I love Madness. And, and I think that's a reasonable player perspective. That is a beloved mechanic among players, even if it does have some problems on the design side.
Yep, for sure. That's awesome. Anything else you kind of wanted to talk about before we start to wrap things up, Brian?
Is this where I plug my shit, or is that at the end?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right. Plug away like a 1930s phone operator.
Oh, all right. I will.
You like that idiom, Pat?
I do not like that at all. That is the least catchy thing you've ever said, Jerry.
Don't cut it, Justin. We're keeping it in.
I like that. Like 10 years after she was a phone operator, she was working the factories during World War II. So she knows how to plug. Like she can work.
Rosie the Riveter, life story.
Yeah, Rosie the Riveter. Previously Rosie the phone operator. Welcome to the workforce. I love you. So, all right, I'll be my Rosie. Bosch and Roll. I'm Bosch and Roll everywhere. BOSH letter NROLL. My YouTube channel is my main avenue of content. I'm also on Twitter, pretty active on there. You can always hit me up there. My YouTube has an attached Patreon. I also have YouTube memberships turned on, which is also just Patreon, but it's handled through YouTube if you want to support the channel. The TCG Player affiliation. So I have links in my Twitter and in my video descriptions where if you click that link, it takes you to TCG Player, but I get paid when you buy stuff. So if you're just not doing that anyway, it's a free roll. Please help me out. And Card Hoarder sponsors my channel as well. So Card Hoarder Loan Services. They're pretty great. That's how I get to play all the crazy decks I play. And I co-host the Eternal Glory podcast with Brian Cook and Phil Gallagher.
Hell yeah. Awesome.
I believe that's all my things.
That's some great things. All right, Pat, you want to get into some scoops and poops?
Yeah, Jerry, who do you want to scoop in the top 8 this week?
Scoop I am scooping in the great people who sent in all of these legacy events that we mentioned at the top of the episode. Please, guys, if your store or LGS is doing weekly or monthly or held even just one big legacy event, please post it on the Facebook. Get the word out there. Let people know that nature is healing and legacy players are returning to the LGSs.
I didn't want to interrupt your intro, but I'll do a Pittsburgh pitch real quick.
I'll do it up.
The Vault in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. I played for an Underground Sea there just this weekend.
Nice.
And
Awesome.
Titan Games in, I forget what they're called. They're out by the airport in Pittsburgh. TAITAN, Titan Games.
Mm-hmm.
They have run Legacy for some reserve list land. They've done it the last 3 months in a row. It was a Tundra, a Trop, and it's Gaia's Cradle in 2 weeks.
Nice.
And those two stores seem like they're going to be doing regular sort of big money hot card tournaments every month. So check out them.
That's awesome. This is just me as a Magic player perspective for my personal preference, but I actually enjoy playing for like dual lands more than playing for cash.
Yes, absolutely.
Even if the cat. Because like even if the cash is more valuable or whatever, it's just like it feels more like you're winning a trophy than winning a prize.
Also, I mean, to be fair, like if you're going to try to min-max a tournament, like the reserve list cards appreciate far quicker than the dollar does. So
true. That's like that meme that was floating around the internet. It was like a StarCraft tournament where it was like first place was $500, second place was $200, third and fourth place was like 16 Bitcoin, which is like like $300,000 in today's value or whatever.
Yeah, that's wild. I also love winning cards. Even honestly, I even like winning packs like over just cash.
Well, I break from you on the packs. I'd rather have cash than packs, but
I love opening,
cards.
I love opening packs.
I love cards, and stores get to puff up their prize pool too. Like if they're buying cards, if cards are actually coming in the door and they're spending buy list prices, like a 1K, they could give away 2K or 1.5K in cards and just puff up for the same cash, which is just really exciting to me.
Because also every time that like when you come up with like a prize list and it's just a cash value, it is, it's right there in black and white. Right. But if you do an Underground Sea, people are just going to quickly TCG player Underground Sea, take the highest price near mint copy and just be like, oh, this is the prize pool. It's $1,000 or whatever it is.
Plus players play when it's for an Underground Sea.
Yes.
Like when you're in
Can't split it.
Yeah. When you're in the top four and it's just like $600 between you each get 150, handshakes all around. Let's go get dinner.
Right.
Like you gotta play for the Underground Sea.
You gotta play for
Love
it. Yep.
Pat loves that. No splits.
No splits, kill them all. That's how it should be. I learned that from our intern Cyrus. It's one of my favorite things anyone's ever told me ever.
After I won Grand Prix Columbus, I texted him immediately. He was over in Europe playing Legacy and Vintage on some trip, and I texted him from Columbus, and I was like, "No splits, kill them all."
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Awesome. Maybe we should talk to Michelle, Pat. Maybe the next LAL Open after this one, maybe we can do a like a dual land prize pool. If that's
I think that'd be super cool.
Yeah, let us know, guys, on the Facebook page, or contact us if you prefer playing for dual lands or other high value cards over cash, just to make it more interesting. Let us know. We want to make the event as fun as possible.
To me, that's also kind of like a love letter to the format. You know what I mean? When the prizes you're giving out are the cards you play in the format you're playing, like to me, it's like I don't know. It's just the ultimate like form of sincerity and appreciation for what you're doing.
Yep. And I will say some stores have the right heart, but they're a little confused because I've definitely like played legacy tournaments for standard cards, and the store is just like, oh, this is a $50 standard card that everyone wants. Let's have it be the prize for this tournament. And then legacy players like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. What is this? What is this trash?
Yeah. Or like please never do like booster packs of whatever the latest standard set is for legacy. Like legacy players don't want that.
No.
Like it's fine if you want to do like, hey, here's like throwback. Like we're going to be playing for some like onslaught booster packs. Then I'm like, all right.
Even if they're like master sets. Master sets are fun to open too.
Master sets, I would say that's fine. You know, just make it something that the legacy players actually like.
Right. Agreed.
Awesome.
So scoops, Jerry.
We did scoops. I did my scoop. We went on a huge diatribe.
We did.
So I'm good. It's
Brian, did you have any scoops in the top 8 you want to do? Anyone you want to shout out or appreciate?
Yeah, I want to scoop in the local stores. I mean, it's the same thing we just said, but I want to scoop in the local stores who are coming out swinging on the other side of vaccination with, yep. I got an underground seat for you. I got a Gaia's Cradle for you. Show up. Let's play Magic. Thank you for doing that. Pittsburgh's legacy scene is awesome, and I hope they keep going, and I hope other people are running similar things. Like, keep this format.
I love it. Nice. I love it. Yeah, I'm gonna scoop in you guys. Thanks for coming on and hanging out. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Jerry and Brian. It was good to catch up with you. I'm gonna link your YouTube channel and the Twitter and the show notes, obviously. And yeah, man, it's great to talk. And I'm really excited to get back to Paper Magic this week. I'm already de-sleeving the old deck and re-sleeving the new deck, so I'm very, very excited. I can't wait to have some legacy stuff to talk about. It's a shame because I got all my cards in Japanese, and like there are some cards I actually don't know exactly what they do. So like I'm gonna need Oracle Text on Murktide Regent and Ragavan and Dragon Rage Channeler, and also Expressive Iteration, because I don't know those all like off the top of my head. So it's gonna be pretty funny.
That's the thing with all these like alternate art cards in foreign languages. Like I have friends who have like the alternate art Japanese card in like their EDH deck, and they haven't played it for a couple of months. They pick it up and it's like, not only do I not know the Oracle text of this card, I'm not even really sure what this card is anymore. Like I don't even know this card's name.
Yeah,
it's in Russian with like alternate art. It's like it's 1 in a black. I think it's an instant or sorcery. I'm gonna guess it's Demonic Tutor, but I'm not sure.
I'm definitely gonna be spending the next couple of days trying to memorize what those cards do, but I'm sure I'll make a mistake at some point. It'll be fun.
Excellent. Play your cards, people. And if you don't play your cards, make sure you can play versions you can read.
Awesome. All right. Well, if that's it, Jerry, we can wrap up this week. Thanks everyone for hanging out. If you want to support the show, obviously it's patreon.com/Leaving a Legacy, and we'll catch you all next week.
See ya. Bye.